When a horrific murder takes place, particularly in a close-knit community, the impact is felt for decades to come. But as well as the pain felt by the victim's family, there is also the physical legacy of the houses and gardens which are linked to these heinous crimes. More often than not, houses connected to notorious killings are demolished in a bid to destroy the memories which will forever be associated with this site. This practice is largely to stop ghoulish souvenir hunters plundering the houses and gardens for relics of the notorious crimes. But there is also the reality that most people just do not want to live in a house with just a sinister connection. In this video we will take a look at some of the houses associated with the UK's most infamous serial killers. Some of these are still standing to this day. 25 Cromwell Street, Gloucester. Fred and Rose West put the city of Gloucester on the global map when they murdered at least 12 victims from their end of terrace home between 1971 and 1987, which later became known as the House of Horrors. However, Fred did claim to have killed many more. With their insatiable and sadistic sexual appetites, the warped duo tortured their victims before mutilating them and burying them wherever they could hide their heinous crimes. Police eventually discovered the human remains hidden in the house's cellar and buried under paving slabs in the garden when the couple's children inadvertently told social workers about what was going on at the property. The pair were arrested in 1994, with Fred being held on suspicion of murdering at least 12 women. He hanged himself in 1995 while awaiting trial for the murders, while Rose was later convicted for her role in 10 of the killings. Rose West, however, never confessed to the killings and remains in prison to this day at Her Majesty's Prison Newhall in Flockham, West Yorkshire, still insisting she is innocent to this day. The property, which Fred bought in 1973, was large and included a large cellar which was used as Fred's torture chamber. With several spare rooms in the house, the couple took in lodgers, many of whom went on to meet their grisly fate. When the cellar became too full to hide any more remains, the rear garden became the new burial ground. Police got a search warrant when the West children told social workers that they didn't want to, quote, end up under the patio like their sister Heather. Heather's body was found by police in the garden, along with those of 8 other young girls and women. 3 other victims, including Fred's 8-year-old stepdaughter Charmaine, were found buried elsewhere. Aware that no one would want to live in a property with such evil history, Gloucester City Council bought the house for £40,000 before demolishing the house in 1996. It was replaced by a landscaped, tree-lined 150-foot public walkway which now connects the residential street to the city centre. No remnants of the house or property are known to still exist. 16 Wardlebrook Avenue, Manchester. Notorious Moors murderers Myra Hindley and Ian Brady were responsible for a series of murders committed in the 1960s. They, however, killed their last 2 victims not on Saddleworth Moor, but at their 2-bedroom council house at 16 Wardlebrook Avenue in Hattersley, Manchester. While victims Pauline Reed, John Kilbride and Keith Bennett were buried on the moors, the body of 17-year-old Edward Evans was found wrapped in plastic in their spare room, having been beaten to death with a hatchet. The second victim who was killed at the house was 10-year-old Leslie Ann Downey, who had been lured there from a fairground in 1964 before being killed and buried on the moors. After the pair were jailed for life in 1966, Hattersley local council tried to re-let the house, but they were forced to rethink the situation when a succession of tenants complained of a terrible sense of dread hanging in the air and asked it to be rehoused. With no one willing to live there, the house was finally pulled down in 1987. There is now a stark gap where the house once stood. Despite this, sightseers obsessed by the killer's notoriety still go to the site and take pictures to this day. Brady and Hindley were both sentenced to life behind bars in 1966, Brady passing away in 2017 from heart failure, while Hindley died in 2002 of pneumonia. 46 Lower Belgrave Street, London. Lord Lucan disappeared without trace shortly after his child's nanny, Sandra Rivet, was bludgeoned to death with a lead pipe in the basement of his sprawling townhouse in Lower Belgrave Street, London in 1974. The aristocrat became the prime suspect after it emerged that he had also attacked his wife, Lady Lucan, beating her repeatedly. She managed to escape and raise the alarm at a nearby pub, but by then, Lord Lucan had driven away from the scene in a borrowed Ford Corsair. In a state of panic, Lord Lucan then called his mother to collect the children before speeding to a friend's house in Sussex. His car was subsequently found abandoned and soaked in blood in New Haven, East Sussex, complete with a large piece of lead piping similar to the one found at the crime scene, which was discovered in his boot. An inquest jury declared him the killer a year later. Then, in 1999, he was declared dead for probate purposes. Since then, there have been numerous supposed sightings of the murder suspect from around the globe, including reports that he fled to start a new life in West Africa, which have never been verified. While his fate remains a mystery, the vast Belgravia home where Miss Rivet met a brutal end still stands to this day. 5 College Close, Cambridgeshire. Ian Huntley had lived at 5 College Close in Soham, Cambridgeshire for just 1 year when he murdered schoolgirls Holly Wells and Jessica Chapman on the 4th of August 2004. In a crime that sent shockwaves through the small community, Huntley, who worked as the site manager for Soham Village College and neighbouring St Andrew's Primary School, invited the 2 10-year-olds back to his house on the grounds of the college, where he carried out the brutal murders. After the killings, Huntley appeared on TV appealing for information about the girls multiple times, but the truth emerged 2 weeks later when their bodies were found in a ditch near Lackham Heath in Suffolk. His girlfriend Maxine Carr, the girl's teaching assistant, had provided him with a false alibi, saying she had been with Huntley at the time of the murders. However, she was later found to have been in Grimsby at the time of the murders. To this day, only Huntley really knows what happened on the day the 2 girls died. Set in the sprawling college grounds, the house had a small back garden and looked out onto the college car park and lawn. Neighbours' houses stretched out behind it, but there was no other buildings in front of it, just a lawn and a car park the girls would have crossed, unnoticed, on their last walk in Soham. The meticulous clean-up carried out by Huntley and Carr meant that police found no blood, hair, or fingerprints from either girl inside the house, except for prints on Holly's hands found on a box of chocolates she had given to Maxine Carr weeks earlier. The 3-bedroom detached house, which was on the site of the school where he worked, was knocked down by a 20-ton bulldozer in 2004, reduced to a pile of dust. The families made clear that they did not want a memorial on this place, so council workers laid grass and landscaped the area to blend in with surroundings as it remains today. The rubble was crushed and dispersed at secret locations to prevent people trying to take bits of the house as macabre souvenirs. A garage also belonging to Huntley close to the property was demolished a few weeks later, while the hangar building where the girls' Manchester United shirts were found was also swiftly destroyed. Maxine Carr was sentenced to 3.5 years for perverting the course of justice in 2004, at which she served 21 months before being released with a new identity. Carr is known to still live in the UK, but with a new husband and a new baby son as of 2022 in a police safe house. However, her new identity and exact whereabouts are unknown. Huntley is serving his double life sentence at Her Majesty's Prison Frankland in Durham, where he will be eligible for parole in 2042 at the age of 68. 197 Melrose Avenue and Flat 23D, Cranley Gardens, London. For this entry we have 2 properties which both relate to the same series of crimes. In December 1978, Dennis Nilsson committed his first murder at 195 Melrose Avenue and went on to murder 11 more men before moving to the flat in Cranley Gardens in 1981. He would desecrate his victims and then hide the remains under the floorboards of the house and in the garden before later burning the bodies in 3 separate bonfires. These were attended by people also living in the house who were unaware he was burning dead bodies and hiding the smell by using old tyres. Today, 195 Melrose Avenue is still standing. The property sold for nearly £500,000 in 2016. Strangely, when viewed on Google Maps, the property is fully visible, but the next door house is completely blurred out. In February 1983, Dennis Nilsson rang a plumber to ask him to inspect a grim smell which was coming from the drains at his house at 23 Cranley Gardens. When the tradesman investigated, it turned out to be the stench of rotting human flesh from the innocent men who Nilsson himself had murdered. Once police were called to the property, Nilsson, a 37-year-old civil servant, went to admit that there were more body parts hidden in his home and that he had carried out a series of horrific murders both during and before he lived at the property. It later emerged that Nilsson had murdered 15 young men since 1978. A necrophile with many dark secrets, Nilsson had targeted mainly homosexual or homeless men who he would pick up in bars across London or just on the street. After inviting them to his house, Nilsson would supply his victims with food and alcohol before killing them via strangulation. Once arrested, he told the police how he boiled the heads of his victims in a large cooking pot to dispose of their brains. He would then cut up the rest of their bodies and store them in plastic bin bags at the property. He also later admitted to having with some of the corpses. Nilsson was jailed for his murders in 1983 and given a whole life order. He had pleaded diminished responsibility in order to seek a verdict of manslaughter, but this was not accepted. He died at York Hospital on 12th of May 2018 of a pulmonary embolism. This flat has been completely overhauled since the murders and was bought by a cash buyer for £100,000 in July 2015, having initially been listed for £300,000. Mount Pleasant Cottage, Wales. The rented cottage where Mark Bridger murdered 5-year-old April Jones, which was dubbed the House from Hell, was torn down in November 2014. The paedophile killer snatched April as she played in the street near her home in Machylif, Mid Wales, before taking her to the whitewashed property known as Mount Pleasant Cottage. Large pools of April's blood were found under the carpet in front of the living room fire, where small fragments of her bones were recovered by police. April's blood was also found in the bathroom and hallway of the cottage, despite a desperate bid by Bridger to clean up his rented home using detergents and bleach. Officers who searched the property said they were overwhelmed by the strong stench of bleach. It is sadly believed that he dumped most of her remains in a fast-flowing river, and her body has never been found. When police pieced together that he was the prime suspect after his Land Rover was seen near where April was taken, Bridger told police that he accidentally had run her over. He said he had meant to take her to hospital before blacking out because of a combination of drink and panic. On the 30th of May 2013, the father of 6 was convicted of murder, abduction and perversing the cause of justice, but never admitted his guilt. He was given a whole life order, which he is serving at Wakefield Prison in West Yorkshire. After his conviction, the Welsh Government purchased the building and decided to tear it down. The parents wanted to have the site converted into a memorial for the little girl. After consultation with the community, grass and trees were planted at the site in September 2015. 50 Irvin Drive, Kent. Peter Tobin is currently serving 3 life sentences for the murders of Polish student Angelika Klock, 23, Scottish schoolgirl Vicky Hamilton, 15, and Dina McInnell from Tillingham, Essex. Tobin, who pretended to be a church handyman and used a false name, left Miss Klock with severe head injuries and multiple knife wounds after subjecting her to a sexually motivated attack in September 2006. Police found the young woman's body in a space beneath the St. Patrick's Roman Catholic Church in the Anderson area of Glasgow. Her body had been dumped through a hatch in the chapel floorboards next to the confessional box with her hands bound and her mouth gagged. Police set up Operation Anagram in the wake of the discovery and followed a trail of clues to the garden in Irvine Drive, Margate, Kent, where Tobin lived. There, they unearthed both Miss Hamilton's remains and those of fellow missing teacher Miss McNichol. Tobin was jailed in 2007 for and murdering Miss Gluck. He was later convicted for other murders at a separate trial. He is currently being held at Her Majesty's Prison, Edinburgh. The families of Tobin's victims wanted the house torn down, but the council instead decided to renovate the 3-bedroom property to rehouse a deserving family. A former police officer who led the investigations into the killer said he definitely had other victims. The house has been fully refurbished and is still lived in to this day. 6 Garden Lane, Bradford. Serial killer Peter Sutcliffe, also known as the Yorkshire Ripper, was living in 6 Garden Lane in Bradford when he butchered 13 women and tried to kill 7 others. The Bradford lorry driver started by killing prostitutes but moved on to bludgeoning women at random in the streets. The deprived killer was only caught when police found him with a prostitute in his car. Officers realised that his car had false number plates and soon noticed that he shared many physical characteristics of the Yorkshire Ripper. Until then, the identity of the so-called Yorkshire Ripper was unknown. The killer had earned the nickname because he had used screwdrivers, hammer and a knife to carry out the killings. The following day, police returned to the scene of Sutcliffe's arrest, where they found a knife, hammer and rope which the killer had dumped the previous day. After 2 days of intense questioning, Sutcliffe finally admitted he was the Yorkshire Ripper. Sutcliffe was convicted for the murder of 13 women and the attempted murder of 7 others. He was given 20 life terms, meaning he would never be released from prison. Sutcliffe later claimed he was on a mission from God to kill prostitutes, although not all of his victims worked in the trade. The other victims, aged between 16 and 47, included 2 university students, a civil servant, a bank clerk and a supermarket worker. Sutcliffe had been at Broadmoor since 1984 after he was diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia following his life sentence in 1981. In 2016, he was moved to Frankland Prison's DSPD, a unit for inmates with dangerous and severe personality disorders. He later passed away in 2020 from complications following COVID-19. And incredibly, his former wife Sonia still lives at the property from where Sutcliffe unleashed his heinous crimes. The house was purchased for £16,000 in 1977. 10 Rillington Park, West London. Notorious killer John Christie, who killed at least 8 women, including his own wife, lived at 10 Rillington Place in the heart of London's Notting Hill. During the 1940s and 50s, when Christie unleashed his 10-year killing spree, Notting Hill was starkly different to the affluent area it is today, and Rillington Place was simply a row of crumbling terraced houses. But behind that dilapidated facade, Christie had hidden his victims' bodies. The killer buried some in his garden, while others were stashed beneath his floorboards or hid away in a secret alcove in his kitchen. Christie's crimes went undiscovered for many years, and shockingly, the bodies were not discovered until new tenants moved into the property in 1953. Christie was subsequently arrested and was convicted and hanged the same year. After his arrest, the notorious address attracted macabre tourists who wanted to see the house where the brutal killings had taken place. The street was later renamed Ruston Close, and in 1970 the house where Christie lived was demolished. There is now a small garden where Christie's house used to be, but rather than being listed as contaminated land, it is listed as a memorial garden. 13 Front Street, County Durham. This one is a rather short entry as there isn't much information that I could find on this one. The terraced house where serial killer Mary Ann Cotton was arrested in 1873 has barely changed in the years since. Now painted blue, this is the property in which Cotton, who claimed the lives of her children and up to 21 other people, mainly by arsenic poisoning, committed her final murder. She was tried and executed by hanging at Durham County Court in March 1873. That's the video, everyone. So I hope you've enjoyed looking into the darker history of the UK. And don't forget to punch that like button, comment down below, and of course subscribe for more. Follow us on Twitter and Instagram to know when our videos come out. And last thing to say, I have been X-Killer X, and I will see you in the next video.